Somebody asked me for a refund last month on 10 mobile lines he had bought 6 weeks earlier. He was blocked on the same target with those 10 as he had been with the 4 he ran before them. Endorphin. Then I asked to see his request log because I wanted to know what 10 carrier addresses had failed to fix. The answer was in the first 20 rows. Every request landed about 200 milliseconds after the one before it, all the way down for 9 hours. No address on earth fixes that. Why this is a strange thing for me to say. I sell mobile proxies, real SIM cards on Singapore carriers, modems in a rack in my flat, about $10 a month in data per line, and another $1.50 in modem depreciation. When someone orders 40 lines instead of 4, that is a real difference to my month. So read this knowing I am talking myself out of orders and knowing I still take the order when the person in front of me actually needs one. The thing I have learned from this seat is unglamorous. Most of the time the address was never the problem and the purchase was a way of avoiding the log. The 5-minute test, there is one check that settles the question and almost nobody runs it before they buy. Open a normal browser, go to the exact page your scraper was asking for when it failed. Do it from the same address your scraper is using. If the page loads, your address is clean. The site is willing to serve that content to that address right now. Whatever refused your scraper was something your scraper did. That is the whole test. 5 minutes including the coffee. And while the browser is open, open the network tab beside it. Every request that page makes is listed there, with the headers it sent and the order it fetched things in. You are looking at a free reference copy of what a legitimate visit to that URL looks like, which is the thing your code is failing to resemble. The part people get wrong, they run the browser on their laptop at home and the scraper on a server somewhere else, 2 different addresses. All that proves is that a residential line in Singapore can load a web page which was never in question. If your job runs on a server, the check has to leave from that server, SSH in and fetch the URL from there, or point a browser through the same exit your code uses. That is the step that gets skipped, and skipping it is how people talk themselves into a purchase. There is one more way the test lies to you. If the page loads and the content is quietly wrong, stale prices, a list cut off at 20 rows, you have passed nothing. Check that the thing on the screen is the thing you wanted. So what did it? Say the page loaded. Your address is fine and the problem is you. 2 of the causes you have already heard about, so I will be quick. Space and the fact that your scraper never stops to think. A person opens a page and then does nothing for 40 seconds because they are reading it. Your code has no reading step. It asks, receives, asks again, and the gap is whatever your network latency happened to be that second. Even with a sleep in there, the sleep is identical every time, and a constant gap is easier to spot than a fast one. Then the headers. Your client announces itself as Chrome and sends 4 of them. A browser sends somewhere between 12 and 18 in an order that does not change, including the ones about language and about how the page is being fetched. The request contradicts itself and catching that takes an if statement. Right, now the ones people miss. The order you ask things in. A person arrives at the site through the front or through a search result, and then they click, they land on a category, open a product, go back, open another one, follow a link buried in the description. Their path is a walk. It has a shape. The shape is messy, and it always starts somewhere reachable. Your scraper starts at page 400 of a listing with no referrer, having never seen page 1, then 401, then 402. It never goes back. It never opens the same item twice, which people do constantly. It never wanders into the part of the site it does not need. Spotting that requires no address reputation and no machine learning. It is a sequence, and it is a sequence no human produces. I watched a job get flagged inside 200 requests on nothing else. The addresses were mobile, the pace was polite, and the headers were a real browser because it was a real browser, and it walked the catalog in perfect numerical order like a librarian with no other interests. The endpoint that exists to catch you. Some URLs are watched harder than others, and the ones watched hardest are the ones only worth hitting if you are automating. The JSON feed sitting behind the product page. The internal search API the front end calls. The parameter that returns 100 results when the page shows 20. The bulk lookup nobody has ever clicked because there is no button for it. Those are convenient, which is exactly why they are instrumented. A site that has been scraped before knows precisely which of its own URLs scrapers love. It has watched them get hammered. So you can be gentle, correctly dressed, on a beautiful carrier address, and still be the only party in the log asking for that path at that volume. The address never enters into it. You select it yourself. The one no address saves you from. Then there is the case where you are logged in. If your job authenticates, the account is the identity. The address is a detail hanging off the account. You can rotate through 400 exits, and every request still arrives carrying a cookie that says exactly who you are. It goes further than useless. An account whose session hops between 40 addresses in 3 cities inside 10 minutes looks stranger than an account that sat still. You took the one signal making that session boring and made it interesting. People buy pools to protect logged-in work, and it is the clearest case of buying the wrong thing. The account carries the risk. Spend the money on however many accounts you are genuinely allowed to hold, and give each one a stable address it keeps. Why a bigger pool feels like it worked? Here is the arithmetic I wish more sellers said out loud. Suppose the real limit is behavioral. Your scraper does something that takes roughly 1,000 requests from a single address to become obvious. With one address, you die at 1,000. With 10, you die at 10,000. With 40, 40,000. Every purchase moves the wall. None of them removes it. And moving the wall feels identical to fixing the thing for however long it takes you to reach the new one, which on a big enough order is weeks. So the buyer comes back, convinced the last order worked, and the pool is still a touch small. I have sold that upgrade. Good margin, bad answer. Which brings me to the position I will defend. The first proxy purchase most people make is a way of avoiding their own traffic. It costs money instead of attention, and money is by far the cheaper of the two to spend at 11 at night on a job that has been failing since lunch. What the purchase costs you besides money. This is the part I had to learn expensively, and it is the real argument. A big pool makes the failure harder to read. With one address, everything that happens to you happens in one place and accumulates. You can watch the run degrade. You can find the exact request where the tone changed. Spread the same job across 40 addresses, and each one carries a 40th of the story. No single line ever gets far enough into the pattern to show you the pattern. Your error rate stops being a cliff and becomes a gentle fog at 2%, and 2% of everything is far harder to chase than one address dying at request 800. A customer once sent me 40 lines worth of logs and asked which address was the bad one. None of them were. The job failed at the same rate on every single line, evenly, which is the signature of a behavior problem and the hardest shape in the world to see once it has been smeared that thin. So the first purchase avoids the diagnosis, and then it makes the next diagnosis worse. When it really is the address, now the honest other half, because sometimes it genuinely is, and leaving that out would be its own kind of lie. If your job runs from a cloud server on a data center block, you can be refused before behavior is considered at all. The block belongs to a hosting company, the network number is published, and some sites drop the whole range on site. This is the case where the 5-minute test disagrees with itself. The page loads from your home line and dies from the server, and that difference is your answer. If the content is served differently by country or refused outside it, no amount of good manners gets you the right page. You need to be somewhere else. That is a purchase. If you are on a cheap shared pool, the address may have been burned by whoever held it last week. You inherited a stranger's reputation. Worth swapping, though worth swapping to a better supplier rather than to more of the same. And if the volume is legitimate and genuinely large, one address cannot plausibly ask for 2 million pages because no person does. That is a case for parallel identities, chosen deliberately, each behaving like a separate visitor with its own history. A real reason to buy, and nothing like the panic order after a block. There is a fifth, which is blast radius. Some people buy a separate address, so the line that eventually gets burned is one they can afford to lose, and the office connection everybody else works over stays clean. That is insurance, sensible, and it repairs nothing. The question I ask before I quote, when somebody asks me for a bigger pool, I ask what changed between the first request and the one that failed, not the address. The behavior. Did it fail at a consistent count or at a consistent time of day? Did the error arrive on one URL or across all of them? Did the response body change before the status code did? If they can answer, I quote, and it is usually a smaller order than they walked in for. If the answer is that they do not know, more addresses buy them a delay and cost them the diagnosis. What I cannot tell you which of these is yours. I see requests and responses from the outside and I infer, and I have been wrong about it. I also cannot promise the browser test never misleads. A site can decide to serve a person and refuse a program from the same address on purpose, and then the address really is clean and the work is still impossible. That happens on the large platforms, and my advice there has not moved. Buy the data, use the official API, or drop the project. The full write-up with the test in the form I give customers and the 5 cases where buying is the right call is at proxyscraping.org. Subscribe for more on proxies for scraping.